The California sun beat down on the Naval Special Warfare Center like a hammer on an anvil. Heat shimmered off the concrete, turning the air into liquid glass. In the distance beyond the shooting range, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly blue and indifferent. Lieutenant Declan Mercer squinted through his scope, sweat trickling down his temple, despite the bandana tied across his forehead. His finger rested gently on the trigger of the Barrett M82A1, a weapon that weighed 30 pounds and could punch a hole through an engine block at 2,000 yards. The target was 1,200 yards downrange, a steel plate 12 inches square. Child's play for a SEAL sniper. He exhaled, slowly squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The Barrett roared. The recoil drove into his shoulder like a mule kick. Downrange dust exploded 6 inches to the left of the target. "Damn it," Mercer muttered. Behind him, 3 other Navy SEALs stood in various states of frustration. Chief Petty Officer Garrett Vaughn wiped his face with a tactical glove. Petty Officer Lane Sutherland checked and rechecked his calculations on a notepad. Boone Crawford, oldest of the group at 42, simply stared at the target with the patience of a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "That's 20, Vaughn said quietly. 20 shots, 4 shooters, not one hit. Admiral Thomas Morrison stood 30 feet back, arms crossed over his chest. At 65, he still carried himself like the SEAL Team 6 operator he'd been 3 decades ago. His face was carved from leather and granite, weathered by sun and salt and secrets that would never see daylight. "Check your weapons," Morrison said. His voice was gravel and whiskey. "Check your ammunition. Check everything." "Sir, with respect," Mercer said, standing up from the shooting position. "There's nothing wrong with the equipment, it's the conditions. The wind's gusting at 15 miles per hour, temperatures 98 degrees, and the mirage is playing hell with our sight picture." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Conditions are always wrong, Lieutenant. That's why we train." "Yes, sir." Morrison looked at his watch. Then he looked past the shooting line toward the mess hall that sat 200 yards behind them. "We're about to have a visitor," he said. The 4 SEALs turned. A figure was walking across the compound toward them. Small, maybe 5'3", blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She wore the white uniform of mess hall staff, slightly too large for her frame. "You've got to be kidding me," Mercer said under his breath. The woman approached with steady steps. She didn't hurry. She didn't hesitate. She moved like someone who knew exactly where she belonged, even if nobody else agreed. Reagan Ashford stopped 10 feet from the shooting line. Up close, she looked younger than her 26 years. Heart-shaped face, hazel eyes that were too intelligent for someone serving scrambled eggs to warfighters. There was something in the way she held herself, a stillness, the kind of calm that comes from discipline, not fear. "Sir," she said to Morrison, "permission to attempt the shot." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind and the distant sound of waves. Then Mercer laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh exactly. More disbelief than malice. "Sweetheart," he said, "this is a Barrett M82A1, not a spatula." Reagan didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Morrison. "Permission, sir." Vaughn shifted uncomfortably. Sutherland looked down at his boots. Crawford remained perfectly still, watching. Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "The weapon is yours." Reagan walked to the shooting line. She didn't ask for help, didn't ask for instruction. She simply knelt behind the Barrett, adjusting her position with small, precise movements. Mercer opened his mouth to say something, but Morrison raised one hand. The gesture was small, absolute. Reagan settled into the rifle. Her right hand found the grip. Her left hand supported the stock. She pressed her cheek against the rest, her eye finding the scope with the familiarity of old habit. She didn't move for 30 seconds. The wind gusted. Died. Gusted again. Reagan's breathing slowed further, until it was barely visible. Then she squeezed the trigger. The Barrett bellowed. Fire and thunder. Downrange, the steel target rang like a church bell. Dead center. The echo rolled across the range and faded into silence. Reagan stood up. She engaged the safety. She stepped back from the weapon. "Thank you, sir," she said to Morrison. Then she turned and walked back toward the mess hall, ponytail swaying with each step. 4 Navy SEALs stood frozen, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Morrison's face broke into the smallest smile. "Gentlemen," he said, "meet Reagan Ashford. She'll be joining your team for Operation Lighthouse." "Sir," Mercer's voice was strangled. "She's a cook." "No, Lieutenant. She's a CIA analyst who's been undercover in my mess hall for the last 2 months. She's also the daughter of Master Chief Silas Ashford. And unless I'm very much mistaken, She's the only person in this facility who can make the shot we need in Syria. Morrison let that settle for a moment. Briefing room, 20 minutes. All of you. He walked away, leaving four of the Navy's finest snipers standing in the desert heat, trying to understand how a woman who served breakfast had just accomplished what they could not. 3 months earlier, Reagan Ashford had been nobody. The CIA headquarters building rose from the Virginia landscape like a monument to secrets. Reagan sat in a cubicle on the fourth floor, surrounded by monitors displaying satellite imagery of the Middle East. She'd been analyzing data for 3 years. Roads, buildings, heat signatures, patterns of life. Information that would eventually make its way up the chain to someone who made decisions. Someone who mattered. Reagan had never mattered. She knew this with the certainty of someone who'd spent her entire adult life being overlooked. At 5'3", with a face that looked perpetually younger than her actual age, she'd learned early that people saw what they expected to see. A girl, not a woman, certainly not an operator. Her phone rang, internal line, unknown extension. Ashford, she answered. Reagan, Deputy Director Rutledge. I need you in conference room 7. Now. The line went dead. Reagan stared at her phone. James Rutledge was third in command of the entire Central Intelligence Agency. She'd never been in the same room with him. Hadn't even seen him except in official photographs. She saved her work, locked her terminal, and walked to the elevator. Conference room 7 was on the 7th floor. Executive territory. The carpet was thicker here. The walls held portraits of former directors, men who'd shaped the course of nations from behind closed doors. Rutledge was waiting inside. 62 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades in the field before he'd accepted a desk. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than Reagan's monthly salary. He wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him, mid-40s, dark hair, severe expression. She wore a pantsuit and had the alert posture of someone who'd done more than push paper. Sit down, Reagan, Rutledge said. She sat. Rutledge opened a folder. Inside were photographs. Reagan saw faces. Middle Eastern men, Americans. One woman. Do you know who I am, Rutledge asked. Yes, sir. Then you know I don't call junior analysts up here for coffee and conversation. I'm here because your father was the finest sniper I ever served with. I'm here because you're Silas Ashford's daughter, and right now I need someone with his skills. Reagan's throat tightened. She hadn't heard her father's name spoken aloud in years. Not like that, not with that tone of respect. Sir, you're not a field operative. You're not trained for combat operations. You've never fired a weapon in anger. Rutledge leaned forward. But you can shoot. Silas made sure of that. And according to your psych profile, you have the same gift he did. Spatial awareness, ballistic calculation, the ability to read wind and distance like other people read books. He pushed the photographs toward her. 3 CIA officers, killed in the last 6 months. Iraq, Syria, Yemen, all by the same shooter. Long-range engagements, 1,200 to 1,400 yards. One shot, one kill. Clean, professional, impossible to predict. Reagan studied the photos. The victims were in different locations, different circumstances, but the wounds were identical. High-powered rifle, center mass, no second shots. We call him the architect, the woman said. Her voice was clipped, East Coast educated. Syrian national, former intelligence officer under Assad. He's building a network of foreign fighters and weapons suppliers, planning something big, something that will kill a lot of Americans. And you want me to analyze B? No, Rutledge interrupted. We want you to kill him. The room seemed to contract. Sir, I'm not qualified. You're the only person who's qualified. Rutledge pulled out another photograph. This one showed a compound in the desert. Walls, guard towers, a central building. This is where the architect operates. Aleppo countryside. We have a window, one shot, 1,400 yards from an abandoned building. But here's the problem. He leaned back in his chair. The architect has a sixth sense. We don't know if it's training or instinct, but every time we've sent snipers after him, he moves, changes position, like he knows he's being watched. Our psychologists think he can sense intent, the aggression, the killer's presence. That's not possible, Reagan said, and yet 4 of our best are dead because of it. Rutledge's eyes were hard. Your father had something, a way of shooting that didn't telegraph. He called it the ghost protocol. Silas could take a man from 1,000 yards, and the target would never know he was there until the bullet arrived. Reagan's hands trembled. She clasped them in her lap. My father is dead. Yes, Afghanistan, 2005. I was there when we brought him home. Rutledge's voice softened just slightly. He saved my life twice. Once in Somalia, once in Kosovo. I owe him everything. And now I'm asking you to finish what he started. What he started. Rutledge pulled out one final photograph. It showed a younger version of the architect. 20 years ago, maybe. He stood beside another man in Syrian military uniform. This is Karim al-Rashid, the architect's real name. In 2003, he was part of a network that facilitated insurgents into Iraq. One of those insurgents carried out the attack that killed your father's team. Silas spent 2 years tracking the network. He was close. So close. And then he died in an unrelated operation. Reagan stared at the photograph. You're telling me the architect is connected to my father's death? I'm telling you that your father spent the last years of his life hunting the people who killed his brothers. And now I'm giving you the chance to finish that hunt. The woman spoke again. We've arranged for you to infiltrate Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado. You'll pose as mess hall staff, observe, learn. And when the time comes, you'll deploy with a SEAL team to Syria. Why the infiltration? Because we think there's a leak. Someone in the SEAL community is feeding information to hostile forces. We need someone on the inside who nobody suspects. Rutledge stood up. He walked to the window, looked out over the Virginia countryside. Your father gave everything for this country. You don't owe us the same. You can walk out of here, go back to your desk, and nobody will think less of you. But if you say yes, he turned to face her. If you say yes, you'll have a chance to honor his memory in a way very few people ever could. Reagan sat in silence. She thought about her father. Tall, quiet, hands that were gentle when he taught her to hold a rifle and lethal when he held one himself. She'd been 8 years old the first time he'd taken her to the range on their Montana property. Shooting isn't about anger, he'd told her. It's about clarity, about being so still inside that the rifle becomes an extension of your intention. No hate, no fear, just purpose. She looked up at Rutledge. When do I start? 2 months later, Reagan stood in the mess hall at Naval Special Warfare Center, Coronado, California. The space smelled like coffee and disinfectant. Reagan moved between tables with a tray of dishes, her hair tucked under a white cap, her uniform deliberately oversized to hide her figure. She'd been here 8 weeks. 8 weeks of serving meals to men who didn't see her. 8 weeks of listening to conversations, watching interactions, mapping the invisible networks that connected these warriors. The SEALs were careful. They didn't discuss classified operations in the mess hall, but they talked about everything else. Training exercises, personnel issues, the small frustrations and victories that made up their daily lives. Reagan cataloged it all. She'd identified 12 potential suspects. Men who displayed patterns that might indicate divided loyalties, late-night phone calls, unusual meetings, financial problems that could make them vulnerable to foreign intelligence services. Lieutenant Declan Mercer was at the top of her list. He was 30 years old, unmarried, and one of the finest snipers in naval special warfare. He was also frequently absent from the base during off hours, and twice she'd seen him making encrypted calls that he terminated the moment someone approached. But Reagan wasn't certain. Not yet. She needed more time. More access. Coffee, Reagan turned. A man stood at the counter, late 60s, maybe 70. He wore civilian clothes, but he moved like military. Shoulders back, weight balanced, eyes that tracked movement with practiced efficiency. Yes, sir, she said, filling a cup. He took it with a nod. Then he studied her face for a moment too long. Do I know you? He asked. I don't think so, sir. Nash Holloway. I'm a civilian contractor. Teach marksmanship to the young bucks who think they know everything. His voice had the rough texture of a lifetime of cigarettes and salt air. You remind me of someone. Reagan kept her expression neutral. I get that a lot, sir. Nash continued to study her. Then his eyes widened just slightly. Silas, he said quietly. You're Silas Ashford's girl. Reagan's hand tightened on the coffee pot. Nash looked around. Nobody was paying attention. He leaned closer. The way you stand, the way your eyes track. I'd know that anywhere. He took a sip of coffee. Meet me at the South Range tonight, 2200 hours. Come alone. He walked away before Reagan could respond. The South Range was dark and empty when Reagan arrived at 10 o'clock. She moved through shadows with the caution Rutledge's people had taught her during her 2 weeks of basic tradecraft training. Nash was waiting by the equipment shed. He had a rifle case at his feet. Relax, he said as Reagan approached. If I wanted to turn you in, I would have done it 8 hours ago. How did you know? Because I served with your father for 6 years. SEAL Team 6. We did things in places that don't officially exist. And Silas talked about you. His little girl who could outshoot half the team by the time she was 12. Nash smiled, but it was sad. I was at Dover when they brought him home. I've carried one of his dog tags for 10 years. He pulled out a chain from under his shirt. Reagan saw the familiar stamped metal. Ashford Silas J. Her throat closed. Why are you here? Reagan, really? She made a decision. Sometimes you had to trust. Sometimes that was the only way forward. I'm CIA. I'm looking for a leak in the SEAL community. Nash nodded slowly. I figured it was something like that. You're too good at being invisible. Too careful. He knelt down and opened the rifle case. Your father taught you to shoot, but did he teach you the ghost protocol? Reagan's breath caught. You know about that? I was there when he developed it. Somalia 1993. We had a target, warlord named Idid, impossible shot. Silas made it anyway. And when I asked him how, he said it wasn't about killing, it was about accepting. Nash pulled out a rifle. Chetak M200 intervention. Accepting that the shot was already done, that the bullet had already flown, that all he was doing was observing what had always been true. He stood up holding the rifle. It sounds like mystical nonsense, but it worked. Silas could take shots that made other snipers look like amateurs because he didn't project, didn't telegraph intent. He just let it happen. Nash handed her the rifle. If you're Silas Ashford's daughter, you've got the same gift in your blood, and I'm going to help you find it. Because whatever you're really here for, it's going to require the impossible, and that's what we do. Reagan took the rifle. It was heavier than she remembered. Heavier than the hunting rifles her father had let her shoot on the Montana ranch. I don't know if I can do this. Neither did your father, right up until the moment he pulled the trigger. Nash walked toward the range. Come on, we've got work to do. 6 weeks passed in a blur of training. Reagan lay prone on the desert floor, eye pressed to the scope of the Chetak. The target was 1,400 yards downrange, beyond the edge of reliable accuracy for most shooters, but Silas Ashford hadn't been most shooters. Nash lay beside her with a spotting scope. Wind, he asked. 7 miles per hour. Left to right, decreasing. Temperature, 91 degrees, dropping as the sun sets. Coriolis effect. Reagan did the calculation in her head. 0.8 inches right at this distance and latitude. Good, now forget all of it. Reagan looked at him. Nash's face was serious. All that math gets you close. But the ghost protocol isn't about math. It's about knowing. Your father used to say that the bullet knows where to go. Our job is just to get out of its way. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't, but it works. Nash adjusted the spotting scope. Close your eyes. Reagan closed them. The target is already hit. The bullet has already flown. You're not making it happen. You're just observing what has always been true. Do you understand? No. Good. Understanding is overrated. Feel it instead. Reagan lay there in the desert heat, eyes closed, breathing slowly. She thought about her father, about the quiet way he'd moved through the world, about the stillness he'd carried inside himself. One shot, one life saved, one mission completed, she whispered. It was something Silas used to say. Open your eyes. Reagan opened them, looked through the scope. The target was there, distant, shimmering in the heat. She didn't think, didn't calculate. She simply let her body settle into the rifle, let her breathing slow to nothing, and squeezed the trigger. The Chetak roared. 1,400 yards away, the target rang. Nash looked through the spotting scope, then lowered it slowly. Center mass, first shot. He looked at Reagan with something like awe. You've got it. God help us all, you've got it. Reagan sat up, hands trembling. My father would be proud, and he'd be terrified, because now they're going to use you. Nash stood up, brushed dust from his pants. Whatever they've got planned, it's going to be bad. Silas always said the ghost protocol was a last resort, the kind of thing you only do when there's no other choice. There isn't, Reagan said quietly. Then I guess we'd better make sure you're ready. 1 month after that impossible shot in the desert, Reagan sat in a briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Center. The room held 6 people. Admiral Morrison stood at the front beside a projection screen showing satellite imagery of Syria. Reagan sat in the second row, flanked by 4 Navy SEALs. Lieutenant Declan Mercer sat to her right, arms crossed, face unreadable. Chief Petty Officer Garrett Vaughn sat to her left, 35 years old with the calm competence of a man who'd saved lives under fire. He had a wallet photo of his wife and 5-year-old daughter clipped to his vest at all times. Petty Officer Lane Sutherland, the communications specialist, sat behind her, 28, eager, respectful. He was the one who'd congratulated her after the impossible shot on the range. Petty Officer First Class Boone Crawford sat in the back row, 42 years old, 2 deployments to Iraq, 3 to Afghanistan. He never spoke unless he had something worth saying. Morrison clicked a remote. The satellite image zoomed in on a compound. This is the target, Aleppo countryside. The man inside is Karim al-Rashid. Western intelligence calls him the architect. He's been facilitating attacks against American personnel for 15 years. 3 months ago, he personally killed 3 CIA officers. Another click, a different image. A building partially collapsed. This is your shooting position. Abandoned apartment building 1,400 yards from the compound. You'll infiltrate through the Turkish border, move to Aleppo, set up, and wait. The architect appears every 4th morning at 0600 hours. That's your window. Mercer raised a hand. Sir, why her? Morrison looked at Reagan. Because the architect can sense when he's being targeted. Every sniper we've sent has failed. Lieutenant Ashford has a unique skill set that may allow her to defeat his counter-surveillance instincts. Lieutenant Mercer's voice was sharp with surprise. As of this morning, Miss Ashford has been granted a direct commission as a Navy Reserve officer. She's your shooter, Mercer. Your job is to get her there and back alive. Reagan saw the muscles in Mercer's jaw tighten, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Morrison continued. You deploy in 72 hours in Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. From there, you'll cross the border covertly. The operation is deniable. If you're captured, the United States government will disavow any knowledge of your presence. If you're killed, your bodies will not be recovered. Are we clear? 5 voices responded in unison. Clear, sir. Morrison's expression softened just slightly. You're the best we have, all of you. Bring each other home. The briefing ended. The SEALs filed out. Reagan started to follow, but Morrison called her back. Reagan. She turned. Morrison walked to her, reached into his pocket, and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Nash asked me to give you this. He unwrapped it. A worn notebook, her father's field journal. Silas kept notes on every mission, every shot, every lesson learned. Morrison handed it to her. Nash thought you should have it. Said there are things in here about the Ghost Protocol that only Silas understood. Reagan took the journal with trembling hands. The leather cover was cracked and faded, stained with sweat and desert sand. She opened it to a random page. Her father's handwriting. Precise, methodical. Shot 1,247 yards. Win 12 pm. Target never knew. The secret isn't the math. It's the acceptance. Her throat tightened. Morrison placed a hand on her shoulder. Your father was the finest operator I ever knew. Not because he was the best shot, not because he was the bravest, but because he understood something the rest of us spent years trying to learn. The mission isn't about glory. It's about getting your people home. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Get them home, Reagan, and come home yourself. 72 hours later, Reagan stood on the tarmac at Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. The Black Hawk helicopter sat like a sleeping predator. Reagan stood beside it with her team checking and rechecking her equipment. The Chaytak M200 was in a hard case at her feet. 45 pounds of precision engineering. Beside it, her personal kit. Body armor, night vision, medical supplies. Everything she'd need to survive in hostile territory. Garrett Vaughn approached holding a photograph. His daughter, 5 years old, blonde hair, gap-toothed smile. Lily, he said, she thinks I fix computers for the Navy. He tucked the photo into his vest. Make sure I see her again, Lieutenant. I will, Reagan said. Lane Sutherland appeared next, offering a fist bump. Let's make history, ma'am. Reagan bumped his fist. Boone Crawford simply nodded at her, no words. But the respect in his eyes was clear. Declan Mercer was the last to approach. He'd been distant since the briefing. Professional but cold. He stopped in front of her. I don't know if you're as good as they say, he said quietly, but you're one of us now, and that means I'll put my life on the line to protect yours. All I ask is that you do the same. I will. Mercer studied her face. Then slowly he extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Ashford. Reagan shook his hand. His grip was firm, calloused, the hand of a man who'd spent years pulling triggers. Thank you. The pilot gave a signal. Time to board. Reagan picked up the Chaytak case and climbed into the Black Hawk. The others followed. The rotors began to spin slowly at first, then faster. The world became noise and vibration. The helicopter lifted off. Through the open door, Reagan watched Turkey fall away beneath them. Lights of cities, darkness of countryside, and ahead the border. Syria. Her phone buzzed. A final encrypted message from Rutledge. She opened it. The architect knows you're coming. Abort or proceed at your own risk. Reagan stared at the screen. Mercer leaned close, shouting over the rotor noise. What is it? She looked at him, at Vaughn, at Sutherland and Crawford. 4 men who'd put their lives in her hands. She deleted the message. Nothing, she shouted back. Just good luck from headquarters. Mercer nodded and turned away. Reagan looked out the door again at the darkness rushing past. 3 days to the shot. 3 days to discover who had betrayed them. 3 days to survive. The Black Hawk crossed the border and disappeared into the Syrian night. The Black Hawk touched down in a valley carved by millennia of wind and war. Reagan felt the skids kiss earth, then settle with finality. The pilot killed the engines. The rotors wound down their whisper, fading into the vast Syrian silence. Mercer was first out, rifle up, scanning the darkness through night vision. Vaughn followed, then Crawford with his heavy pack of demolitions. Sutherland came next, already deploying a portable antenna for satellite communications. Reagan came last, the JTAC case heavy in her hands. The helicopter lifted off immediately, a rotors churning dust into a biblical storm. Then it was gone, a shadow against stars, and the 5 of them were alone in a country that wanted them dead. Move, Mercer said quietly. They moved. The landscape was ancient and hostile. Rocks jutted from sand like broken teeth. Scrub brush clung to life in defiance of logic. The temperature had dropped to 50 degrees, cold enough that Reagan could see her breath. They walked in tactical formation. Mercer on point, Crawford and Vaughn flanking, Sutherland in the middle with Reagan monitoring communications and GPS. Every 20 minutes they stopped, listened, waited. The silence was absolute. After 2 hours, Mercer called a halt at a cluster of boulders. We're 15 clicks from the border, he said, checking his GPS. This is our first waypoint. We rest here until 0400, then move to the safe house. The safe house was a legend among covert operators, an apartment in eastern Aleppo maintained by a network of informants who asked no questions and remembered no faces. It had sheltered CIA operatives, British SAS, Israeli Mossad. It was neutral ground in a war that recognized no neutrality. Reagan set down her case and unslung her pack. Her shoulders had ached. She'd trained for this, but training and reality were different languages. Vaughn materialized beside her with an energy bar. Eat, he said. Your body's burning calories faster than you think. Reagan took the bar. Thank you. Your first time in country, first time anywhere outside the United States. Vaughn smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. Afghanistan was my first. 2007. I was 27 years old and convinced I was immortal. He looked out at the darkness. Lost that conviction on day 3 when an IED took out the vehicle in front of ours. Driver was a kid from Ohio, 22 years old. Never even got to fire his weapon. I'm sorry, it's true. Don't be. He knew the job. We all know the job. Vaughn pulled out the photograph of his daughter. Even in the dim light of filtered moonlight, Reagan could see the love in his eyes. This is why I do it, so Lily grows up in a world where people like the architect don't get to operate freely. Reagan looked at the photograph. The little girl's smile was pure innocence. She's beautiful. She's everything. Vaughn tucked the photo away. You got anyone back home? Someone waiting. Reagan thought about her apartment in Virginia. Empty, quiet, no photographs on the walls. No one who'd notice if she didn't come back. No, she said. Vaughn studied her for a moment. Then he placed a hand on her shoulder. You've got us now. That's something. He walked away to check the perimeter. Reagan sat against a boulder and closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Her mind kept cycling through the encrypted message from Rutledge. The architect knows you're coming. How the operation was classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people knew the details. Unless someone on this team was feeding information to hostile intelligence. She opened her eyes and looked at her companions. Mercer sat 20 feet away, field stripping his rifle with the mechanical precision of a man who'd done it 10,000 times. His face was unreadable in the darkness. Crawford lay on his back, hands folded across his chest, breathing slowly. Asleep or meditating. With him, it was hard to tell. Sutherland hunched over his communications equipment, making microscopic adjustments to the antenna angle. Vaughn walked the perimeter, rifle ready, eyes scanning. One of them was a traitor. Or none of them were, and Reagan was chasing shadows. She reached into her vest and pulled out her father's journal, opened it to a page at random. Her father's handwriting stared back at her in the red glow of her filtered flashlight. Trust is earned in increments. Betrayal comes all at once. The question is never whether to trust. It's whether you can afford not to. Reagan closed the journal and tucked it away. One shot, one life saved, one mission completed, she whispered. At 0400, Mercer gave the signal to move. They walked through the pre-dawn darkness, navigating by GPS and memory. The terrain changed from desert to agricultural land, abandoned by years of war. Irrigation ditches ran dry as bone. Fields that once grew wheat now grew only dust and the occasional cluster of poppies. Dawn came slowly, then all at once. The sun rose over Syria like an accusation, revealing a landscape of devastation. Buildings stood gutted and empty. Vehicles rusted where they'd been destroyed. In the distance, Reagan saw the skeletal remains of what might have been a school. Jesus, Sutherland muttered. Keep moving, Mercer said. We're exposed out here. They reached the outskirts of Aleppo by 0900. The city was a corpse. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to rubble by years of barrel bombs and artillery. The few buildings still standing were pocked with bullet holes and scorched by fire. But people still lived here. Reagan saw them moving through the ruins. Old men, women in headscarves, children who'd never known peace. They looked at the 5 Americans with eyes that held no surprise. Foreign soldiers were just another feature of the landscape. The safe house was in the Eastern District, a 4-story apartment building that had somehow survived mostly intact. Mercer led them to the 3rd floor. He knocked on a door in a specific pattern. The door opened. A man in his 60s stood there. Thin, gray beard, eyes that had seen too much. You're late, he said in accented English. Traffic was hell, Mercer replied. The man smiled without humor and stepped aside. The apartment was sparse. Mattresses on the floor, a table, chairs, windows covered with blankets to block observation from outside. In one corner sat a diesel generator, currently silent. You have 48 hours, the old man said. After that, my protection ends. The Russians patrol this district. They find Americans, we all die. Understood, Mercer said. He handed the man an envelope. Reagan knew it contained $5,000. The old man took the money and left without another word. Vaughn immediately moved to the windows, checking sightlines. Crawford began unpacking demolitions, setting up charges on the doors as insurance. Sutherland deployed his communications gear, establishing a satellite uplink to Incirlik. Mercer turned to Reagan. The shooting position is 4 blocks northeast, abandoned apartment building, 8th floor. We'll move there tomorrow night, set up before dawn. You'll have 6 hours to make the shot. And if I miss, you won't miss. Mercer's voice was flat, certain. You're Silas Ashford's daughter. You don't miss. Reagan wanted to tell him that her father had missed, had failed, had died. But she said nothing. Mercer checked his watch. Get some sleep. We stand watch in 4-hour rotations. Crawford has first shift. The others spread out on mattresses. Reagan lay down, fully clothed, rifle within arm's reach. She closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of the broken city. Distant gunfire, the rumble of heavy vehicles. Somewhere a child crying. She didn't think she'd sleep, but exhaustion had its own logic. She fell into darkness. When she woke, the light coming through the blankets had shifted. Afternoon. She'd slept 6 hours. Vaughn sat by the window watching the street below. Anything, Reagan asked quietly. Russian patrol passed by 2 hours ago. Haven't seen them since. He glanced at her. You talk in your sleep. Did you know that? Reagan's stomach dropped. What did I say? Couldn't make it out. Just words. Sounded like you were having a conversation with someone. Vaughn smiled. My wife does the same thing. Drives me crazy when we're camping. Reagan relaxed slightly. How long have you been married? 8 years. Met her at a barbecue in San Diego. She was a nurse at the Naval Hospital. Most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. His voice softened. Still is. Does she know what you really do? She knows enough, knows I can't tell her everything, but she understands. Her father was Army. Korea. Vaughn shifted his position, wincing slightly. I've got 2 more years until retirement. Then I'm done. Going to buy a house in Colorado, teach Lily to ski, be a normal dad who goes to school plays and soccer games. That sounds nice. It does, doesn't it? Vaughn looked out the window again. Assuming I make it that long. At 1800 hours, Mercer called them together for a briefing. He spread out satellite photographs on the table. The architect's compound, the shooting position, potential exfiltration routes. The target appears every fourth morning at 0600, Mercer said. He walks from the main building to the guard tower. Approximately 40 seconds of exposure. That's your window, Reagan. Reagan studied the photographs. The compound was heavily fortified. High walls, guard towers at each corner. She counted at least 15 visible security personnel. What about counter-sniper measures? They've got spotters on the walls, thermal imaging, the works. Mercer tapped the photograph of the shooting position. But they're watching the obvious positions. Low buildings, direct line of sight. The building we're using is 1,400 yards out. Extreme range. They won't expect it. Unless they've been told we're coming, Reagan said quietly. The room went silent. Mercer's eyes locked on hers. Explain. Reagan made a decision. Trust or paranoia? She chose trust. Before we deployed, I received a message from my handler at CIA. The architect knows we're coming. Someone leaked the operation. Crawford sat up from his mattress. Sutherland's hand moved imperceptibly toward his sidearm. Vaughn's face went hard. Mercer's expression didn't change. And you're telling us this now? I'm telling you because we need to be ready for a trap. This might not be a simple sniper operation. It might be an ambush. Or you might be the leak, Crawford said. His voice was like gravel. CIA plant, feeding information to the enemy, leading us into a kill zone. Reagan met his eyes. If I wanted you dead, Chief, you'd already be dead. I could have sabotaged your gear, poisoned your water, called in your position to Russian patrols. I didn't, because we're on the same side. Are we? Mercer stood up. You've been undercover for months, playing a role. How do we know this isn't just another role? Vaughn raised a hand. Easy, all of us. Easy, Mercer's voice rose. We're in hostile territory with a compromised operation and a shooter we've known for 3 days. How the hell am I supposed to keep this team alive? By trusting your training, Vaughn said, and by remembering that Admiral Morrison personally vouched for her. He knew Silas Ashford. He knows Reagan. If he says she's solid, she's solid. Mercer was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Reagan. Your father, Somalia, 1993. What was his call sign? Reagan didn't hesitate. Ghost. They called him Ghost because he could take a shot without the target ever knowing he was there. What rifle did he carry? M40A3. But he preferred the M24 SWS, said it had better accuracy beyond 800 yards. What was the last thing he said to you before his final deployment? Reagan's throat tightened. She remembered that day, the Montana ranch, her father in his dress blues standing by his truck. He said, one shot, one life saved, one mission completed. Then he hugged me and drove away. I never saw him again. Mercer stared at her, then slowly he nodded. Okay, I believe you. He looked at the others. But that means one of us is compromised. Or someone back at Incirlik. Or someone at CI. Either way, we proceed with the assumption that the architect knows we're here. How does that change the plan? Sutherland asked. It doesn't. We're committed. The only way out is through. Mercer pointed at the map. We move to the shooting position at 0200 tomorrow. Set up. Wait, if it's a trap, we spring it. If it's not, Reagan takes the shot and we exfiltrate. Crawford spoke again. And if we're wrong, if the leak is in this room, Mercer's hand rested on his sidearm. Then someone doesn't make it home. Simple as that. The tension was thick enough to cut. Reagan broke it. There's another possibility. The leak might not be intentional. Everyone looked at her. Explain, Mercer said. Sutherland is running constant satellite communications. Every time he transmits, there's a chance hostile signals intelligence picks it up. They might not know the details of our operation, but they know Americans are in the area. The architect could be increasing security as a precaution, not because he knows specifically about us. Sutherland looked stricken. I'm using military-grade encryption. Frequency hopping. There's no way. Russian signals intelligence is sophisticated, Reagan interrupted. They might not be able to decrypt the messages, but they can triangulate the source. Track patterns. If you've been transmitting on schedule, they could predict our movements. Sutherland checked his equipment. His face went pale. I've been sending status updates every 6 hours. Standard protocol. Stop, Mercer ordered. As of now, communications blackout. No transmissions until we're ready to exfiltrate. But headquarters will think we're compromised. We are compromised, just not the way they think. Mercer looked at Reagan with something like respect. Good catch, Lieutenant. The mood in the room shifted. Not trust exactly, but the first stirrings of it. Vaughn pulled out an MRE and tossed it to Reagan. Eat. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She caught the package. Chicken and rice. She'd eaten worse during training. As night fell over Aleppo, the five of them sat in the safe house and prepared for what might be their last operation. Crawford field stripped his rifle for the third time. Sutherland studied maps by red-filtered flashlight. Vaughn wrote a letter to his daughter that he'd never send. Mercer sat alone by the window watching the street. Reagan approached him carefully. Lieutenant, he didn't turn. You can call me Mercer. We're not exactly running a parade ground operation here. Mercer, can I ask you something? Depends on the question. Why did you doubt me back there, after everything? Mercer was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 years ago, I was in Fallujah. We had an interpreter, local guy, worked with us for 8 months. Good man, saved our lives twice. We trusted him completely. Mercer's hand clenched into a fist. Turns out he was feeding information to AQI. Led us into an ambush. I lost 3 men that day. Good men. Men with families. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Mercer finally looked at her. So yeah, I doubt. I question. I assume everyone's lying until they prove otherwise. It's the only way I've stayed alive this long. I understand. You're CIA. You lie for a living. So do you, Reagan said quietly. Every time you tell a mother her son died serving his country, when what you really mean is he died because intelligence failed, or politicians made bad decisions, or someone somewhere screwed up. We all lie, Mercer. The question is what we're lying for. Mercer studied her face, then unexpectedly he smiled. It was small, bitter, but real. Silas would have liked you. You knew my father. Met him once. SEAL Team 6 reunion, 2004. I was just a boot lieutenant. He was a legend. I asked him what it took to be a great sniper. You know what he said? Reagan shook her head. He said the best snipers are the ones who hate killing the most, because they understand the weight of it. They don't pull the trigger lightly. Mercer turned back to the window. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I do now. Reagan stood beside him looking out at the broken city. Do you think the architect hates killing? I think the architect is very good at it. Whether he hates it or not is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant to me. Tomorrow I'm going to end someone's life. I need to know that it matters, that it's justified. Mercer looked at her with something like sympathy. The architect has killed 17 people that we know about. CIA officers, aid workers, journalists. He's planning an attack that could kill hundreds more. Does that justify it for you? Reagan thought about the 3 CIA officers, about the families who'd never see them again, about all the potential victims of whatever the architect was planning. Yes, she said finally, it does. Then tomorrow when you look through that scope and put your crosshairs on a human being, remember that. Remember why you're here, and when you pull that trigger, don't hesitate. Don't doubt, just do what needs to be done. Reagan pulled out her father's journal, opened it to another page. The weight of a trigger pull is 2 pounds. The weight of the decision is infinite, but the mission demands both. She closed the journal and looked at Mercer. I'm ready. At 0200 hours they moved. The city was dark. Power had been out for hours. Only scattered fires provided illumination, casting dancing shadows across the ruins. They moved in silence, ghosts through a graveyard. Mercer led. Reagan followed close behind the Ch-Tac case strapped to her back. The others flanked covering angles, watching for threats. The shooting position was an apartment building that had once been middle-class housing. Now it was a skeleton. Walls stood, but windows were blown out. Stairs were intact, but doors hung askew. The smell of old smoke lingered. They climbed to the 8th floor. The stairwell was treacherous in the darkness. Twice Reagan's boots slipped on rubble. Each time Vaughn's hand was there steadying her. The 8th floor apartment faced northeast. Perfect line of sight to the architect's compound visible in the distance through night vision. Mercer checked the room for structural integrity. Crawford set claymore mines on the stairs just in case. Sutherland established a listening post by the door. Vaughn cleared the adjacent rooms, making sure they were alone. Reagan moved to the window and opened the Ch-Tac case. The rifle gleamed even in the darkness. She assembled it with practiced movements. Stock, barrel, scope, bipod. Each piece clicked into place with satisfying precision. Mercer appeared beside her with a spotting scope. I'll be your spotter. Vaughn will watch our 6. Crawford and Sutherland will cover the exits. Reagan nodded. She settled into position, the rifle resting on a makeshift shooting platform they'd constructed from rubble and sandbags. Through the scope, the architect's compound appeared in grainy detail. Walls, guard towers, the central building, 1,400 yards, maybe 1,410. Extreme range, but within the Chaytak's capabilities. Wind, Cheyenne, Mercer asked. Reagan licked her finger and held it up, felt the air movement. 5 miles per hour, northwest. Steady. Temperature, 58 degrees, rising as the sun comes up. Barometric pressure. Reagan checked a small device on her wrist. 29.87. Stable. Mercer made notes on a data card. Coriolis effect at this range and latitude is 0.7 inches right. Elevation compensation is approximately 32 MOA. You'll need to hold about 3 feet high and 6 inches right. Reagan made the adjustments to her scope. Clicked the turrets. Felt each adjustment lock into place with mechanical certainty. Then she waited. The sun rose slowly. First light appeared at 0530. By 0545, the compound was visible without night vision. Reagan watched guards change shifts, watched vehicles come and go, watched life continue in a place that dealt in death. She pulled out her father's journal one more time, found the page she was looking for. The moment before the shot is sacred, not because of what you're about to do, but because of what you're about to prevent. At 0555, movement near the main building. I've got activity, Mercer said, eye pressed to the spotting scope. Main entrance. 2 guards, opening the door. Reagan's heart rate increased. She consciously slowed her breathing. In, out, in, out. A figure emerged. Medium height, medium build, dark hair, wearing casual clothes, khakis, a polo shirt. He looked like a businessman, not a warlord. Positive ID, Mercer whispered. That's the architect, range 1,412 yards. Wind steady. You have the shot. Reagan centered the crosshairs on the figure's chest. Her finger found the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure. That's all it would take. She thought about her father, about the ghost protocol, about accepting that the shot was already done. The architect started walking toward the guard tower. Reagan's breathing slowed further, until it was barely movement. The world narrowed to the view through the scope. The crosshairs, the target. She began to squeeze the trigger, and then the architect stopped walking. He turned, looked directly at the building where Reagan was positioned, 1,400 yards away, too far to see details. But Reagan could swear he was staring right at her. He knows, she whispered. Negative, Mercer said. He's just checking his perimeter. Standard procedure. Take the shot. But the architect didn't move. He stood there perfectly still, looking toward them. Reagan's finger froze on the trigger. Behind them, Sutherland's voice, urgent, terrified. We've got movement. Ground floor. Multiple hostiles. They're coming up. The architect smiled, 1,400 yards away. Reagan saw it through the scope. He knew. He'd always known. It's a trap, Reagan said. And then the building exploded. The explosion came from below. 3rd floor. Maybe 4th. The entire building shuddered like a wounded animal. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. The floor tilted 5 degrees, then settled with a groan of tortured concrete. Reagan rolled away from the window, pulling the Chaytak with her. Training overrode terror. Protect the weapon. Protect yourself. Move. Mercer was already on his feet, rifle up, moving toward the door. Crawford, report. Crawford's voice came through the radio, static-laced. Claymore on stairwell 4 triggered. Multiple hostiles. Ground floor breached. They're coming up both staircases. Vaughn appeared from the adjacent room, face grim. We've got technical vehicles in the street. PKM machine guns. They're setting up firing positions. Reagan looked through the shattered window toward the architect's compound. The figure in the khakis was gone, disappeared like smoke. Guards were pouring out of the buildings, weapons ready, moving with tactical precision toward their position. They boxed us in, Sutherland said. His voice was higher than normal, fear barely controlled. How did they know exactly where we'd be? Mercer grabbed Reagan's shoulder. Did you take the shot? He looked right at me, right at us. He knew, Mercer. That's impossible. 1,400 yards. Human eyes can't. Another explosion. 5th floor this time. Closer. The building lurched. Somewhere below, concrete gave way with a sound like thunder. Building's compromised, Crawford said, appearing in the doorway. His face was streaked with dust and blood from a cut above his eye. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the entire structure comes down. We need to move. Now. Mercer pulled out a map, spread it on the floor. Exfiltration route Bravo. Through the basement into the sewer system. 3 blocks south to the rally point. That route goes through the compound, Vaughn said. We'll be walking into their arms. Every other route is cut off. This is our only shot. Reagan stared at the map, at the architect's compound, at the building they were in, and suddenly she understood. It's not a trap for us, she said quietly. It's theater. Everyone looked at her. Explain, Mercer snapped. Fast. The architect knew we were coming, but he didn't try to stop us. He let us get into position, let us set up, let us get ready to take the shot. Why pee? Because he's insane, Sutherland offered. No, because he wanted proof. Reagan pointed at the compound. Someone in the U.S. government is feeding him information. Someone high up. The architect needed to verify that the information was real. So he set up this scenario. We come here, we set up. We prove his source is legitimate. And now we die, and that proves it even further. Crawford shook his head. That's speculation. Is it how else would he know the exact building, the exact floor, the exact window? Reagan looked at each of them. Someone told him. Someone who knew the operational details. Someone on our side. A burst of automatic weapons fire stitched through the air outside, the technical's PKM finding its range. Mercer folded the map. Speculation later. Survival now. We go to Route Bravo. Fight through if we have to. Questions. No one spoke. Then move. They descended through a building that was dying. Each floor was worse than the last. The fourth floor was on fire. The third floor had partially collapsed, forcing them to climb over rubble. The second floor was filled with smoke, so thick Reagan couldn't see 3 feet ahead. Crawford led clearing corners with his rifle. Vaughn covered the rear. Reagan moved in the middle, the Chaytak broken down and stuffed back in its case. Every instinct screamed at her to drop it. But she couldn't. Not her father's rifle. Not the Ghost Protocol. They reached the ground floor. The entrance was blocked by rubble from the explosion. Crawford pulled out a small charge, placed it against a wall, detonated it. The wall blew outward, creating an opening. They emerged into a courtyard. Dawn light, smoke, the sound of engines and shouting in Arabic. East wall, Mercer ordered. They ran. 30 yards of open ground. Reagan felt exposed naked, certain that bullets would find her at any moment. They reached the wall. Crawford boosted Vaughn up. Vaughn pulled himself over, dropped to the other side. Then Crawford. Then Sutherland. Mercer cupped his hands for Reagan. Go. Reagan stepped into his hands. He lifted. She grabbed the top of the wall, pulled herself up. For a moment, she was silhouetted against the dawn sky, a perfect target. A shot cracked. The wall beside her head exploded in chips of concrete. She dropped over the other side, landed hard. Pain lanced through her ankle, but she forced herself up, limping forward. They were in an alley, narrow, trash everywhere. The smell of human waste and decay. Basement access 20 meters, Crawford said, checking his GPS. They found it. A metal door, rusted but intact. Crawford tried it. Locked. Stand back. He placed a breaching charge, detonated it. The door blew inward. They descended into darkness. Reagan pulled out a red-filtered flashlight. The beam revealed a basement that had once been a shop. Now it was filled with debris and the detritus of war. Spent shell casings, broken furniture, a child's doll missing one arm. Sewer access is through there. Crawford pointed at a hole in the floor where concrete had collapsed, revealing a tunnel below. The tunnel was barely 4 feet high. They had to move in a crouch, weapons forward, breathing air thick with methane and rot. Water trickled along the bottom, carrying things Reagan didn't want to identify. After 50 yards, the tunnel branched. Mercer checked his GPS. Left, toward the compound. That's suicide, Sutherland said. That's the mission. We don't leave without completing it. The mission was to kill the architect. He's gone. Let's get out while we can. Mercer grabbed Sutherland by his vest. We have one shot at this. One. If we run now, he goes underground. We'll never find him again. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people die because we were too scared to finish the job. I'm not scared. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. Sutherland's face flushed. His hand moved toward his sidearm. Vaughn stepped between them. Enough, both of you. He looked at Mercer. What's the plan? Mercer released. Sutherland, turned to Reagan. Can you make the shot from inside the compound? Reagan's mind raced. What's the range from the compound wall to the main building? 100 yards, maybe less. Then yes, but I'll need elevation and time to set up. The guard tower, Crawford said, northwest corner. If we can take it quietly, you'll have line of sight to the main entrance. It was insane. Walking into the enemy's stronghold, taking one of their guard towers. But Reagan found herself nodding. It could work. Could isn't good enough, Sutherland said. Mercer looked at each of them. Vote. We go forward or we run. Majority rules. Crawford, forward. Vaughn, forward. Reagan, forward. Sutherland stood silent for a long moment. Then forward. But when this goes sideways, I'm saying, I told you so, no. Mercer allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Noted. They moved deeper into the tunnel system. The methane smell grew stronger. Twice they had to wade through water up to their knees. Reagan's ankle throbbed with each step, but she didn't slow down. After 20 minutes, Crawford held up a fist. Stop, he pointed up. Through a grate in the ceiling, Reagan could see sky and walls. They were inside the compound. Crawford examined the grate. Locked from above. I can breach it, but it'll make noise. How much noise? Mercer asked. Enough that everyone within 100 yards will know we're here. Mercer checked his watch. 0630. The architects should be in the main building by now. Once we breach, we have maybe 3 minutes before they converge on our position. Reagan, you'll have one shot. Make it count. Reagan touched her father's journal in her vest pocket. I will. Crawford placed the charge. Shaped, directional, designed to blow the grate straight up without collapsing the tunnel. 3, 2, 1. The charge detonated. The grate flew upward, landed with a clang. Crawford was up and through in seconds, rifle sweeping for targets. Clear. They emerged into a storage area. Crates, barrels, the smell of diesel fuel. An open doorway led to the courtyard. Mercer moved to the doorway, peered out. Guard tower is 40 yards. 2 guards visible. We go fast and quiet. Crawford, you take right guard. I'll take left. On my mark. Crawford chambered a subsonic round. Mercer did the same. Mark. 2 suppressed shots. 2 guards dropped without a sound. Move. They sprinted across open ground. Reagan's ankle screamed, but she ignored it. They reached the base of the guard tower. A ladder led up 20 feet to the platform. Crawford went first. Cleared the platform. Waved them up. Reagan climbed with the Chaytak case strapped to her back. Each rung was agony, but she kept climbing. The platform gave a clear view of the compound. The main building was 120 yards away. Ground level, reinforced door, windows barred. Reagan assembled the rifle. Stock, barrel, scope. She settled into a shooting position using a sandbag Crawford provided for support. Through the scope, she could see the main entrance. Guards, 4 of them, heavily armed. Range, Mercer asked beside her with the spotting scope. 120 yards. Wind negligible. Angle of elevation approximately 10 degrees. Reagan made the adjustments. At this range, the calculations were simple, but her breath came shorter than it should. The adrenaline, the knowledge of what was coming. Breathe, Mercer said quietly. You've got this. Reagan forced herself to slow down. Breathe, find the calm center her father had taught her. The door to the main building opened. The architect emerged. Same khakis, same polo shirt. He was talking to someone inside, animated, gesturing. Reagan centered the crosshairs on his chest. Her finger found the trigger. And then Vaughn's voice, urgent from the base of the tower. Mercer, we've got a problem. Not now, Vaughn. Yes, now. You need to see this. Mercer swore, looked down. Then his face went white. Reagan, don't take the shot. What? Don't take the shot. Through the scope, the architect was still visible, still talking, oblivious. Reagan's finger remained on the trigger. Why, bud? Because he's talking to someone in U.S. military gear, inside the building. The world tilted. Reagan shifted the scope slightly, looked at the figure the architect was talking to, inside the building, partially visible, wearing U.S. military fatigues, holding a satellite phone. She shifted back to the courtyard, where Sutherland should have been with Crawford and Vaughn. He wasn't there. Reagan's mind raced. Sutherland had stayed at the base of the tower when they climbed up. He should be visible in the courtyard with Crawford and Vaughn, but the courtyard only showed 2 figures, not 3. She looked back through the scope at the figure with the architect, U.S. military gear. The same gear Sutherland wore, but at this distance with only a partial view. Vaughn, she called down, keeping her voice controlled. Where's Sutherland? A pause, then Vaughn's voice tight with sudden realization. He said he was checking the perimeter. 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes was enough time to slip inside the main building through a back entrance. Reagan pulled her eye from the scope, looked down at the base of the tower. Crawford and Vaughn stood with rifles raised, pointed at each other. Crawford's the mole, Vaughn shouted up. He's been feeding information to the architect for 8 months. Negative, Crawford shouted back. Vaughn's compromised. He's trying to kill us all. Mercer descended the ladder fast, dropped the last 6 feet, put himself between the two SEALs. Both of you lower your weapons. Neither man moved. Reagan looked back through the scope. The architect was still talking. To someone wearing U.S. military gear. Someone who might be Sutherland. But where was the real Sutherland, if not with his team? Her mind raced, pieces clicking into place. The encrypted message from Rutledge. The architect knows you're coming. The perfect positioning of the trap at the apartment building. The road through the sewers that led directly into the compound. Mercer's insistence on completing the mission despite overwhelming odds. His positioning now between Crawford and Vaughn, not trying to stop them from shooting each other, making sure they were distracted. "Oh God," Reagan whispered. She shifted the scope again, looked at Mercer standing between Crawford and Vaughn, looked at his posture, his positioning, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. He wasn't trying to de-escalate. He was waiting for the right moment to eliminate them both while Reagan was focused on the architect. Reagan swung the rifle, centered the crosshairs on Mercer's head. "Lieutenant Mercer," she called down. Her voice was steady, calm. "Step away from them. Now." Mercer looked up at her. For a moment, his face showed surprise. Then it smoothed into acceptance. "Smart girl," he said. "Just like your father. You're the mole. I'm a realist. The architect pays better than the U.S. government. And he doesn't ask me to kill for politicians who don't give a damn about the men who do their dirty work." Crawford swung his rifle toward Mercer, but Mercer was faster. He drew his sidearm and shot Crawford twice. Center mass. The SEAL dropped. Vaughn fired, caught Mercer in the shoulder. Mercer stumbled, but stayed upright, returned fire. Vaughn took cover behind a crate. Reagan shifted back to the architect. He was moving now, running toward a vehicle. Someone was with him. Sutherland, real Sutherland, hands bound, being dragged as a hostage. She had seconds, maybe less. The Chaitak wasn't designed for moving targets at close range, but her father's words echoed in her mind. The bullet knows where to go. Our job is just to get out of its way. Reagan didn't think, didn't calculate. She simply let her body settle into the rifle, let her breathing slow to nothing, and led the target by 3 feet. Squeezed the trigger. The Chaitak roared. 130 yards away, the architect's head snapped back. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. For a moment, everything stopped. Then chaos erupted. Guards shouting, weapons fire. The compound transformed into a battlefield. Reagan descended the ladder, ignoring the pain in her ankle. Mercer was down, bleeding from multiple wounds. Vaughn stood over him, rifle ready. Crawford lay motionless. Reagan knelt beside him, checked for a pulse. Weak, thready, but there. "He's alive," she said. Vaughn keyed his radio. "Sutherland, you still with us?" Static. Then barely. "They had me in the main building. Heard the shot. The architect is down. Guards are in disarray. If you're going to exfil, now's the time. Can you move?" "They broke my leg, but I can crawl." Reagan looked at Crawford, at Mercer bleeding out, at Vaughn exhausted and wounded. "We can't carry 3 people out of here." Vaughn's jaw tightened. "We don't leave people behind. We might not have a choice." Mercer coughed, blood on his lips. He looked up at Reagan with dying eyes. "Your father," he rasped. "Somalia. He made a choice. Left a man behind to save the team. Haunted him the rest of his life." "Shut up," Reagan said. "He told me. That reunion, said it was the right call, but it destroyed him. Don't make the same mistake." Reagan looked at Vaughn, at Crawford, at the compound walls where guards were regrouping. She pulled out her satellite phone, the one she wasn't supposed to use. Encrypted channel directly to Rutledge. "This is Ashford. Target eliminated. Requesting immediate extraction. 5 personnel, 2 wounded, 1 critical. Compound is hot." Rutledge's voice crackled through. "Extraction team is 20 minutes out. Can you hold?" Reagan looked at the gathering guards. "At least 30, maybe more." "We'll have to." She pulled Crawford to cover behind a concrete barrier. Vaughn helped. They set up a defensive position. 2 rifles. Limited ammunition. 20 minutes, Vaughn said. "We've got maybe 200 rounds between us. Then we make every shot count." The guards opened fire. Bullets chewed into the concrete barrier. Reagan returned fire-measured shots, 1 target per trigger pull. Beside her, Vaughn did the same. Mercer was still breathing. Barely. He looked at Reagan. "Why save me? I betrayed you." "Because my father wouldn't have left you, and neither will I. Silas was better than me, better than all of us." "No, he was just a man who did his best." Same as you. You just made different choices. A bullet impacted inches from Reagan's head. She flinched, recovered, fired back. Another guard down. The minutes crawled by, each second an eternity. Reagan's ammunition dwindled. 15 rounds, 10, 5. And then over the sound of gunfire, a different sound. Rotors. Two Blackhawks appeared over the compound walls. Door gunners opened up with miniguns suppressing the guards. One helicopter landed in the courtyard. The other provided cover. Move, Reagan shouted. She and Vaughn dragged Crawford toward the helicopter. SEALs from the extraction team rushed forward, took Crawford, loaded him aboard. Then Sutherland crawling from the main building, leg dragging. Then Mercer unconscious now. Go! Go! The pilot shouted. Reagan was last aboard. As the helicopter lifted, she looked down at the compound. At the architect's body growing small in the distance. At the guards defeated and scattered. The operation was complete. They flew low over Syria, heading for the Turkish border. A medic worked on Crawford, starting an IV, applying pressure to wounds. Another medic worked on Sutherland's leg, splinting it. Mercer had stopped breathing. The medic checked for a pulse, shook his head. Time of death, 07:15 hours. Vaughn sat against the bulkhead, holding the photograph of his daughter. Tears tracked through the dust on his face. Reagan sat beside him, said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only appropriate response. They crossed into Turkish airspace at 07:40. The helicopters gained altitude. The threat was over. Reagan pulled out her father's journal, opened it to the last page. Her father's final entry. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Remember, the mission is never just about the shot. It's about the people you bring home. That's the real measure of success. Reagan closed the journal. One shot, she whispered. One life saved. One mission completed. But as she looked at Mercer's body, at Crawford fighting for life, at Sutherland's broken leg, she wondered what her father would have thought of the cost. Incirlik Air Base appeared on the horizon. The helicopters descended. Touchdown. Medical teams were waiting. They rushed Crawford and Sutherland away on gurneys. Mercer's body was covered with a flag and carried away with dignity despite everything. Admiral Morrison stood on the tarmac. As Reagan climbed out of the helicopter, he approached. Mission accomplished, Lieutenant. Reagan stared at him. You knew about Mercer. Morrison's expression didn't change. I suspected, but I needed confirmation. Mercer was too valuable to burn without absolute proof. So you used us, used me. I used every asset at my disposal to eliminate a high-value target and identify a traitor in naval special warfare. Yes, Reagan wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, but she was too tired, too hollowed out. The architect knew we were coming because you wanted him to know. You fed Mercer information knowing he'd pass it along. You turned us into bait. I turned you into heroes. The architect is dead. Mercer's network is compromised. And you proved that Silas Ashford's daughter has the same gift he did. Morrison placed a hand on her shoulder. Your father would be proud. Reagan pulled away from his touch. My father would be disgusted. She walked away, limping on her injured ankle, carrying the weight of a successful mission that felt like failure. Nash Holloway was waiting by the hangar, 70-years-old civilian contractor, the last living link to Silas Ashford. He took one look at Reagan's face and knew. Come on, he said gently. Let's get you cleaned up. They walked to a quiet corner of the base. Nash produced a flask, whiskey. Reagan took a long drink. Your father's first mission, Nash said. Panama, 1989. We were tasked with eliminating Manuel Noriega. Went sideways. Silas had to choose between taking the shot and saving a wounded teammate. He chose the teammate. The mission failed, but the man lived. What happened? Noriega was captured 6 months later by conventional forces, and the teammate Silas saved went on to rescue 12 hostages in Iraq. 30 lives because Silas made the human choice instead of the tactical one. Nash looked at the rising sun. Your father believed that operators are people first, tools second. You did the right thing back there. I killed a man. You killed a warlord who'd murdered 17 people and was planning to murder hundreds more. There's a difference. Reagan wasn't sure she believed that, but she wanted to. Deputy Director Rutledge appeared walking across the tarmac with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been making hard decisions for decades. Lieutenant Ashford, we need to debrief. I need to sleep for about 3 days. Sleep later. Right now, I need to know everything that happened in that compound. Reagan stood up, faced him. The architect is dead. That's all that matters. On the contrary, How he died, why he died, who was involved, all of that matters a great deal. Then read my report, sir. Reagan walked away. Nash followed. Behind them, Bear Rutledge called out, "Your father was difficult too. It's a family trait." Reagan didn't turn around. 3 days later, after the debriefing, after the medical examinations, after the paperwork that tried to turn chaos into coherent narrative, Reagan stood in a cemetery in Virginia. Her father's grave was simple. A white headstone, name, rank, dates. Nothing about the missions. Nothing about the lives saved or the enemies eliminated. Just a man who'd served. She placed her father's journal on the headstone. The dog tag Nash had shown her that first night lay on top of it. "I finished what you started," she said to the silent stone. "I don't know if that makes me like you or if I'm just following orders. But I did it, and I came home, just like you wanted." The wind blew through the cemetery, rustling leaves carrying the scent of autumn. Nash stood 20 feet back, giving her space. Reagan opened the journal one last time. "Read the final page again. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Remember, the mission is never just about the shot. It's about the people you bring home. That's the real measure of success." She closed the journal and left it on the grave. "Crawford's going to make it," she said to the stone. "Vaughn's going home to his daughter. Sutherland will walk again. I brought them home, Dad, just like you taught me." The wind picked up, or maybe it was just her imagination. Reagan turned to leave. Nash waited by the car. As she walked away from her father's grave, her phone buzzed. A message from Morrison. "New operation. Deployment in 6 weeks. You're requested by name. Interested." Reagan looked at the message for a long time. She thought about Mercer, about the architect, about the cost of serving. She thought about Vaughn's daughter, about the world they were trying to protect. She thought about her father and the legacy he'd left behind. Then she typed a single word. Yes, because that's what operators did. They completed the mission. They served. They sacrificed. And somewhere in the part of her that was still her father's daughter, Reagan Ashford accepted that this was her life now. One shot, one life saved, one mission completed, until the next one. The car drove away from the cemetery carrying a young woman who'd proven she had her father's gift. The ghost protocol lived on. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Or maybe it was artillery. In Reagan's world, it was hard to tell the difference. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come easy to ghosts.